Welcome back from that break. I hope that you are feeling refreshed and are ready to continue with the last part of the lesson. Here we are going to be looking at the third concept that is related to this system. We will be focusing on the importance of each of the components that are part of the reproductive system. First, we are going to look at the male reproductive system. And here is a diagram of the main organs that make up the male reproductive system. We are only going to focus on a few. And the first one that we focus on, okay, here are the testes. Here it's testes, okay. Remember that testes is spelled like that is for singular when it is one, and testes like that is for plural form. Okay, so what do the testes do? They produce sperm and hormones, and the hormones that they produce is called testosterone. And we already know that the sperm cell that they produced will be used later to fuse with the egg cell. We then have a sperm duct. As you can see, this duct leads from the testes on both sides. It is called a vas deferens or a sperm duct. So it is a duct that carries a semen containing sperm to the penis. So the semen containing sperm moves from this part here called the epididymis. The sperm is produced in the testes, and then they are stored in the epididymis and then travel through the sperm duct and then will pass through the urethra. We already know that the urethra allows urine to pass through it. It also allows semen to flow through it. And it allows a semen to flow through it through a process known as ejaculation. Then we have the external male organ that is part of the reproductive system, and this is known as the penis. It is used to transfer the sperm into the vagina. So the sperm travel in a liquid known as semen. And because we know that cells cannot be seen with the naked eye, if you see semen, you cannot see the sperm cell in there. We just know that semen contains the sperm cells. And as we said when we started the lesson, did you know that this system contains or is made up of the smallest cell and the largest cell? The smallest cell in the system is the sperm cell. Here we then look at a side view of the male reproductive system. And the reason for showing the side view is so that you can see the external sac or the skin that covers or encloses the male testes. And this helps with temperature regulation. We then move on to the female reproductive system. Okay, we have the vagina, also known as the birth canal. It receives the sperm from the male. This is when the penis is inserted in the vagina. Then we have the cervix, also known as the neck of the uterus. We then have the fallopian tubes, okay? We find fallopian tubes on both ends of the female reproductive system. And these extend from the ovary to the uterus to transport a mature egg cell. They are the ovaries. The ovaries are attached to the fallopian tubes, and ovaries and ovary, okay, it's ovaries for plural form and ovary for singular. So you have 1 ovary and 2 ovaries. The ovary is the organ that releases ova or an ovum. We know that ova or ovum refers to the egg cells. And this is released or transported through the fallopian tube. This is the fallopian tube, just as we have looked at the component that is part of the reproductive system. We then have the uterus. It is also known as the womb, and if a female falls pregnant, this is where the baby is kept. So the uterus is a hollow muscular wall where a fertilized egg implants itself. So we've spoken about how the penis will be inserted in the vagina, semen containing sperm will be deposited in here, and then the sperm will need energy to swim to where the egg has been released. And that egg will be found here in the fallopian tubes. That egg has been released by 1 ovary. So what happens is usually one egg cell is released into 1 fallopian tube every month. We are now going to look at the main processes that are part of the reproductive system. We know which components are involved, so we look at how these components function in the processes and how they work together to produce a result or to create offspring. First process related to the reproductive system is called copulation. This is another word for sexual intercourse. What happens in this process is that the male's penis becomes erect and is placed inside the female's vagina. And then we know that in the male reproductive system, sperm are being produced. So that sperm will then be ejaculated here as shown in the second process, or we can say the second process is known as ejaculation. So the semen containing sperm is ejaculated into the vagina or is deposited into the vagina. The semen contains millions of sperm cells. Then we have the third process. This relates to the female reproductive system. An egg cell is released from the ovary into the fallopian tube. We've seen what a fallopian tube looks like, and we know what an ovary is. Once that egg cell has been released into the fallopian tube, either 2 things can happen. So we look at 1. After ovulation, if the egg is not fertilized, then the female will go through menstruation. What happens during menstruation is that females discharge blood and other tissues from the lining of the uterus. This happens on a monthly basis, except during pregnancy. So you do not menstruate during pregnancy because, let's say you've ovulated and then the egg cell, the mature egg cell, came into contact with a sperm cell. What will happen next will be the process of fertilization. So in fertilization, you will have a sperm cell and an egg cell, scientifically known as the ovum, fuse. The nucleus of a sperm joins with the nucleus of an ovum. And then the fertilized egg, the egg that has been fertilized by the sperm cell, is now called a zygote. So once the egg cell has fused with the sperm cell to form a zygote, what will happen next is implantation. But before implantation happens, you will have the zygote travel along the fallopian tube to implant itself on the uterus wall. So here, once it has implanted itself, the zygote, during the process of implantation, the zygote will divide by a process known as cell division to form a ball of cells. This ball of cells moves down the fallopian tube towards the uterus, and this is where implantation takes place. Usually, if implantation takes place in the fallopian tube, that will be known as an ectopic pregnancy, and therefore that zygote will have to, or that fertilized egg will have to be terminated or removed from the female's fallopian tubes, because a baby cannot grow in the fallopian tubes. A baby or an embryo that later develops into a fetus grows well in the uterus, because there a placenta forms where the developing embryo is able to receive nutrients from the mother's blood from the food that they eat and whatever that the mother is putting in or ingesting into their system. Okay, we have mentioned that the ball of cells moves down the fallopian tubes towards the uterus. The zygote attaches to the uterus wall. And then next, we have cell division. We've spoken about cell division. That happens immediately after the egg cell has been fertilized or has fused with the sperm cell to form the zygote. There's constant division of cells that happens that will later form an embryo. Okay, now growth happens. The zygote continues to divide, then grows into an embryo. So a fertilized egg that is developing is known as an embryo in the first 2 to 3 weeks. It is known as an embryo. And then later, it is known as a fetus. Then next, we have puberty. Puberty is the stage in a life cycle when females or girls and males, known as boys, become sexually mature and are later able to reproduce. Hormones are released into the blood, which causes physical changes to the body. So with all the processes that I have mentioned and named, these are all happening in a cycle, just like we learned about the life cycle, or revised or reminded ourselves of the life cycle of a butterfly. So once you go through puberty, then you become sexually mature, and you are able to reproduce. That is because now you have become an adult, and in your reproduction of offspring, your offspring will also be able to go through the stage of puberty, develop secondary sexual characteristics, or become sexually mature to reproduce, and they will be also able to produce their offspring. And that is how the cycle of humans is shown or continues. Let us take a quick ad break and we will be back soon. Welcome back. In this last part of the lesson, we are going to be looking at the health issues that are related to the reproductive system. So the first health issue that is related to the reproductive system is known as infertility. This can be defined or is characterized by the inability to fall pregnant. Okay, so it affects both men and women. So we are first going to look at the causes of infertility in females. And those causes include ovulation disorders, uterine or cervical abnormalities, fallopian tube damage or blockage, damage related to cancer and its treatment. We are going to look at the causes of infertility in males. Okay, in males, and there we had looked at infertility in females. So what causes infertility in males? This could be caused by a low sperm production. It can also be caused by abnormal sperm function or blockages that prevent the delivery of sperm. And then we also have another health issue known as fetal alcohol syndrome. And what happens here, you'd find that an expectant mother uses substances like alcohol during pregnancy. So when a pregnant mother drinks alcohol during her pregnancy, they will have a child born with fetal alcohol syndrome. The alcohol causes a serious birth defects in the unborn baby. The defects include physical and mental challenges. And this is not only related to alcohol, like birth defects in an unborn baby. So if you drink or smoke or use any other drugs, this is what could happen to your child once they are born. This will affect the child throughout their entire life and cannot be reversed. So it is advisable that if you see or know of someone who is expecting a child or a baby, you remind them not to drink or use any alcohol or drugs or smoke anything. Then lastly, we look at sexually transmitted diseases, abbreviated as STDs. Okay, you have a number of STDs, but here we are focusing on HIV and AIDS, syphilis, and gonorrhea. This involves the transmission of infectious organisms such as bacteria and viruses. So we know that HIV is a virus and gonorrhea is a bacteria between sex partners, and it is transferred during sexual intercourse. That is it from our lesson today. I hope that you have thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot. Goodbye.